The relentless winter wind howled through the cracks of Fiona Patterson's weathered cabin like a vengeful ghost, a bitter reminder of all she had lost over the past year. Standing in the doorway of her small homestead nestled in the foothills of Wyoming Territory, 1878, she clutched her last remaining possession of value, a meticulously handcrafted quilt that had taken her nearly 6 months to complete, each stitch holding memories of better days. The 25-year-old widow pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as she peered out at the muddy main street of Clearwater Springs. It had been 8 months since influenza had taken her husband Thomas, leaving her alone with nothing but debt, grief, and the unforgiving frontier to contend with. The food stores had dwindled to nothing, and the harsh early winter had destroyed what little remained of her garden. The quilt was her final hope. With trembling hands, Fiona folded the colorful patchwork carefully, wrapping it in brown paper tied with twine. This quilt represented countless hours of work, patches collected from her wedding dress, Thomas's favorite shirt, and scraps from happier times. But sentiment wouldn't fill her empty stomach, and pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. As she stepped onto the frozen ground, the icy mud crunched beneath her worn boots. The general store was a quarter-mile walk, and each step felt like a surrender. The once vibrant town had changed in recent months. The silver mine that had brought prosperity had begun to produce less, and many families had already moved on to more promising territories. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," called Mrs. Henley from her porch. The older woman's eyes filled with pity as she watched Fiona pass by. "Good morning," Fiona replied, forcing a polite smile while quickening her pace. She couldn't bear the sympathy of others. It only served to magnify her failure to maintain the life she and Thomas had dreamed of building. The bell above the door of Dawson's General Store jingled as Fiona entered. The warmth from the pot-bellied stove a welcome relief from the biting cold. Mr. Dawson glanced up from behind the counter, his bushy eyebrows raising slightly at the sight of her. It had been weeks since she'd been able to purchase anything. "Mrs. Patterson," he acknowledged with a nod. "What brings you in today?" Fiona approached the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I was wondering if we might arrange a trade, Mr. Dawson." She unwrapped the quilt, carefully laying it across the wooden counter. The colorful patchwork seemed to brighten the entire shop, the intricate stitching catching the light from the oil lamps overhead. "My, that's fine work," Mr. Dawson admitted, running a weathered hand over the fabric. "But I'm afraid I don't have much need for quilts at present." "Please," Fiona said, hating the desperation in her voice. "I just need some flour, maybe some beans and salt pork, enough to get through the next few weeks." The storekeeper's expression softened with genuine regret. "I wish I could help you, Mrs. Patterson, but times are hard for everyone. I've extended too much credit already, and my suppliers in Cheyenne are demanding payment." The door opened behind them, letting in a blast of cold air and the jingling of spurs. Fiona didn't turn around, too focused on maintaining her composure as her last hope crumbled before her. "If you could just take it in exchange for a small amount of supplies," she pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Beautiful craftsmanship," came a deep voice from over her shoulder. Fiona turned to find herself looking up at a tall stranger. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. Dark hair curled from beneath his Stetson, and his eyes, a striking shade of blue, studied the quilt with genuine appreciation. "Thank you," Fiona murmured, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable position. "Isaac Xavier," the man introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Just arrived in town, looking to settle some business with the Clearwater Mining Company." Mr. Dawson perked up immediately. "Mr. Xavier, we've been expecting you. I understand you're representing the investors from Denver." The stranger Isaac nodded but kept his eyes on the quilt. "How much are you asking for this?" Fiona swallowed hard. "I'm not selling it outright. I was hoping to trade it for food." Something flickered in his eyes, not pity but understanding. "I see. Well, I've been traveling for weeks and my quarters at the hotel are likely to be sparse. A quilt like this would be worth its weight in gold on cold nights. He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet. I'll give you $20 for it. Fiona gasped. $20 was more money than she'd seen in months, far more than the quilt was worth in practical terms. Sir, that's very generous, but not generous at all, Isaac cut in. It's a fair price for such craftsmanship. He placed the money on the counter. And Mr. Dawson, I'll need supplies as well, whatever the lady requires, plus coffee, sugar, and that side of bacon hanging there. The storekeeper scrambled to fulfill the order, suddenly eager to please the man who represented new money coming into the struggling town. As Mr. Dawson gathered the supplies, Isaac turned to Fiona. Mrs. Patterson, Fiona Patterson, she supplied, still stunned by the turn of events. Mrs. Patterson, I insist you keep the quilt, he said in a lower voice. No sense in you freezing when I'll have a well-heated room at the hotel. Pride flared in her chest. I don't accept charity, Mr. Xavier. His lips quirked into a half-smile. Then consider it a loan. Keep warm until spring, and when the weather turns, you can return it. Before she could protest further, he leaned closer and whispered, or better yet, keep warm with me. The boldness of his suggestion caused her cheeks to burn, but there was something in his eyes that held no impropriety, only a genuine warmth that reminded her of embers in a hearth. Mr. Xavier, I hardly know you, she managed to say, gathering her composure. Then allow me to remedy that, he replied, helping Mr. Dawson stack the supplies into a crate. May I escort you home with these goods? The snow's picking up and this seems too much for you to carry alone. Fiona hesitated. She'd been managing on her own since Thomas died, fiercely protecting her independence. But the provisions were indeed too many for her to carry the quarter-mile back to her cabin, and the snow was beginning to fall more heavily outside the frosted windows. That would be kind of you, she finally conceded. As they stepped outside, the wind had intensified, driving the snow sideways. Isaac carried the crate effortlessly, adjusting his stride to match hers as they made their way through the increasingly treacherous conditions. You're a widow, he stated rather than asked as they walked. Yes, my husband Thomas passed last spring, influenza. Isaac nodded solemnly. I lost my sister to the same outbreak in Denver, terrible thing. The personal revelation surprised her. Most men weren't quick to share their losses. I'm sorry to hear that. Life out here takes as much as it gives, he said, his voice nearly carried away by the wind. But it teaches you to recognize what matters when you see it. They reached her small cabin, and Fiona hurried to open the door. The interior was neat but Spartan, the fireplace holding only a few glowing embers that did little to warm the space. Isaac set the crate on her small table and immediately moved to the woodpile beside the hearth, adding several logs without being asked. Mr. Xavier, you've done enough, Fiona protested, though the sight of the flames leaping to life filled her with gratitude. Isaac, he corrected, brushing off his hands, and I'd say I've barely started. He glanced around the cabin with a practiced eye. Your roof has a leak above the corner there. And that window needs proper sealing before the worst of winter hits. Fiona stiffened. I'm managing just fine, Mr. Xavier. Isaac, he repeated patiently. And I've no doubt you're managing admirably, Mrs. Patterson, but even the strongest among us need help occasionally. He moved toward the door. I'll be in town for at least a month, handling the mining company's restructuring. Should you need anything, repairs, supplies, or simply conversation, I'm staying at the Central Hotel. Before leaving, he paused at the doorway. And Mrs. Patterson. That quilt truly is remarkable work. If you've others to sell, I suspect there would be interest among the mining executives' wives back in Denver. With that, he was gone, leaving Fiona standing in her suddenly warmer cabin with more food than she'd had in months, and a strange feeling in her chest that she couldn't quite name. The next morning, Fiona woke to the unfamiliar sensation of a full stomach and a warm cabin. The provisions Isaac had purchased would last her weeks if she was careful. She'd spent the evening sorting through them, marveling at the coffee and sugar luxuries she hadn't tasted in months. As she prepared a small breakfast, a knock came at her door. Fiona froze, certain it was Isaac returning with more unwanted charity. She smoothed her hair and straightened her dress before opening the door, ready to firmly establish boundaries. Instead, she found Sheriff Miller standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson." "Sorry to disturb you," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "Is something wrong, Sheriff?" "Not wrong, exactly. That newcomer Xavier asked me to check on you, said your roof needed repair before the next snowfall." He glanced up at the weathered shingles. "I'd be happy to take a look if you don't mind." Fiona's initial instinct was to refuse, but the memory of last night's dripping in the corner of her cabin gave her pause. "That's kind of you, Sheriff, but I couldn't impose." "No imposition. Xavier's paid for the materials and my time." The sheriff looked embarrassed. "I told him it wasn't proper, him being new in town and you being a widow and all, but he insisted the work needed doing regardless." Stunned, Fiona stepped back to allow the sheriff entry. As he examined the roof from inside, she wondered at Isaac Xavier's motivations. Was this simply charity from a wealthy businessman or something more? The sheriff departed with a promise to return the following day with materials. True to his word, he arrived with a wagon of supplies and 2 deputies. And by sundown, her roof was sound, her windows sealed, and her woodpile stacked higher than it had been all year. Throughout the week, Fiona found herself watching the street from her window, half expecting to see Isaac's tall figure approaching. But he didn't come, and a part of her was disappointed despite her determination to maintain her independence. On Saturday, necessity finally drove her into town. The general store was busy with weekend shoppers when she entered, but her attention was immediately drawn to Isaac, who stood at the counter in conversation with Mr. Dawson. He spotted her immediately, his face brightening. "Mrs. Patterson," he called, crossing the room to meet her. "I trust the roof is holding against the snow." "It is," she acknowledged, finding it difficult to maintain her resolve in the face of his genuine smile. "I came to thank you, Mr. Xavier, and to repay you when I'm able." "Isaac," he corrected again, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "And there's no debt between us." "There most certainly is," Fiona insisted. "I don't accept charity." "Then accept a business proposition instead," he suggested, guiding her to a quieter corner of the store. "I meant what I said about your quilts. The mining company is hosting a Christmas gathering next month for investors. They've asked me to find suitable gifts for the wives. Local craftsmanship would be perfect." Fiona's mind raced with possibilities. "How many would you need?" "A dozen, if you can manage it." "Smaller pieces would be acceptable, perhaps lap quilts rather than full bedding." "A dozen by Christmas," Fiona calculated quickly. "That's nearly impossible for one person." "I assumed as much," Isaac nodded. "Perhaps you could organize other women in town." "I understand times have been difficult for many here since the mine's production slowed." The idea was brilliant. Several women in Clearwater Springs were skilled with needle and thread, and all could use extra income. "I believe I could arrange that, Mr. Xavier." "Excellent." "And please, it's Isaac." His blue eyes held hers. "Would you do me the honor of dining with me this evening? We can discuss the details of our arrangement." Fiona hesitated. Dining with a man, especially one she barely knew, would certainly set tongues wagging in the small town. Yet the prospect filled her with an unexpected anticipation. "I couldn't possibly. The hotel dining room is perfectly respectable," he assured her, seeming to read her thoughts. "And our business arrangement provides an appropriate reason." After a moment's consideration, Fiona nodded. "Very well. To discuss business." That evening, Fiona dressed in her best remaining dress, a deep blue wool that Thomas had always said matched her eyes. She arranged her auburn hair carefully, pinning it in a simple but elegant style, and allowed herself a touch of rose water on her wrists. The hotel dining room was the finest establishment in Clearwater Springs, though it would have been considered modest in larger cities. Isaac waited for her at a corner table, rising immediately when she entered. Several townsfolk were present, and Fiona felt their curious gazes following her as Isaac held her chair. "You look lovely, Mrs. Patterson," he said quietly as he took his seat across from her. "Thank you," she replied, conscious of her flushed cheeks. "And given our business arrangement, perhaps you should call me Fiona." His smile deepened. "Fiona, then." Throughout dinner, Isaac proved to be a fascinating conversationalist. He spoke of Denver and his travels throughout the territories, asking thoughtful questions about her life in Clearwater Springs. By the time dessert arrived, a luxurious apple pie she hadn't expected, Fiona realized they had discussed everything except their supposed business arrangement. "You're quite clever, Mr. Xavier," she observed, taking a small bite of the pie. "We've spent the entire meal talking, yet haven't once mentioned quilts or your investors." Isaac's eyes sparkled with amusement. "You caught me. Though the business proposal is genuine, I confess I had other motivations for inviting you to dinner. And those would be, to know you better," he said simply. "From the moment I saw you in the store, standing proud despite your circumstances, I knew you were someone special." The directness of his words caught her off guard. "Mr. Xavier, Isaac," he corrected gently. "Isaac," she conceded. "I'm a widow of only 8 months. I'm not looking for complications." "I understand," he nodded, his expression serious, "but friendship needn't be complicated. And I find myself in need of a friend in this town." Something in his tone made Fiona study him more carefully. Despite his confident demeanor and obvious wealth, there was a loneliness in his eyes that resonated with her own. "Then friends we shall be," she agreed. In the weeks that followed, Fiona organized 7 women from town to create quilts for Isaac's business associates. They gathered regularly in her cabin, which became a warm hub of activity and conversation. For the first time since Thomas's death, Fiona felt purposeful, connected to the community that had seemed to drift away from her during her grief. Isaac visited often, sometimes bringing coffee or treats for the quilting circle, other times arriving in the evening after the others had gone, just to sit by her fire and talk. They spoke of books they'd read, places they'd seen or hoped to see, and gradually of deeper matters: his sister's death, his work helping struggling mining communities, her dreams of someday having a family. "Thomas and I tried for years," she confided one snowy evening as they sat before the fire. "But it wasn't meant to be." Isaac reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand in his. "I'm sorry, Fiona. It was my greatest regret," she admitted, "that he died without having a child to remember him by." "He had you to remember him," Isaac said softly. "Sometimes that's the greatest legacy one can leave, the love of someone who truly knew them." As Christmas approached, the quilts were completed 12 beautiful pieces, each unique yet harmonious as a collection. Isaac paid the women generously, ensuring they would all have comfortable holidays. For Fiona, he had an additional surprise. "The mining company's investors are very impressed," he told her as they packaged the quilts carefully. "They've asked if you would consider a regular arrangement, supplying quilts and other handcrafted items for their mercantile in Denver." Fiona could hardly believe it. A regular arrangement. That would mean steady income, Isaac nodded, for you and any of the women who wish to participate. The opportunity was beyond anything she could have imagined when she'd walked into Dawson's store with her last quilt just weeks ago. "Thank you, Isaac. This changes everything." "There's more," he said, looking suddenly nervous. "I've been asked to stay on in Clearwater Springs. The company believes the mine can be profitable again with proper management." Joy surged through Fiona. "You're staying." "If you think that would be acceptable," he replied, his eyes searching hers. "I think it would be very acceptable," she whispered. The Christmas Eve celebration in Clearwater Springs was the most festive the town had seen in years. The mining company hosted a grand party at the town hall, with music, dancing, and more food than many had seen in months. Isaac, as the company's representative, stood at the center of it all, yet his eyes rarely left Fiona. She wore a new dress, a gift from the quilting circle, sewn secretly during their gatherings, and felt truly beautiful for the first time since Thomas's death. When Isaac asked her to dance, she accepted without hesitation, stepping into his arms as if she belonged there. "I have something for you," he murmured as they swayed to the music. "A Christmas gift." "You've already given me so much," Fiona protested. "This is different." He guided her toward a quiet corner of the hall, pulling a small package from his pocket. "Open it." Inside the brown paper was a deed to her cabin and the surrounding 5 acres. "Isaac, I don't understand," she said, confusion washing over her. "The bank was foreclosing," he explained gently. "I spoke with them weeks ago when Sheriff Miller mentioned your situation." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "You bought my home." "I bought the debt," he corrected. "And now I'm giving you the deed free and clear. It's yours, Fiona. No one can take it from you." The enormity of the gift overwhelmed her. "I can't accept this." "You can," he insisted. "But there is one condition." Fiona tensed, suddenly wary. "What condition?" Isaac took a deep breath, then knelt before her, oblivious to the curious stares from across the room. "That you consider sharing it with me." "Not immediately, I know it's too soon, and I know your heart still holds Thomas dear. But someday, when you're ready, I hope you'll allow me to court you properly." The hall seemed to disappear around them as Fiona looked into Isaac's earnest blue eyes. In the weeks since he'd arrived in Clearwater Springs, he had become essential to her in ways she hadn't thought possible. He had seen her at her most vulnerable and never once made her feel less for it. He had given her not charity, but opportunity and friendship when she needed them most. "Isaac," she whispered, "I think I'd like that very much." The winter passed with Isaac calling on Fiona regularly, always respectful of her space and her grief, yet steadily becoming a fixture in her life. By spring, the quilting circle had expanded into a proper business, with orders coming from as far as Chicago for their distinctive frontier-inspired designs. The mine, under Isaac's management, began to produce again, bringing renewed prosperity to Clearwater Springs. With her portion of the quilting business's profits, Fiona was able to expand her garden and add a proper bedroom to her cabin. It was on a warm evening in early summer, almost exactly a year after Thomas's death, that Fiona finally understood she was ready to move forward. Isaac had come for dinner, bringing fresh trout he'd caught that morning. As they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, she turned to him. "Do you remember the day we met?" she asked. Isaac smiled. "How could I forget?" "You were trying to trade your last quilt for food. And you bought it, then told me to keep it," she recalled. "You said, 'Keep warm with me.'" "I was rather forward," he admitted with a chuckle. Fiona took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You were exactly what I needed, though I didn't know it then." Isaac's expression grew serious as he gazed at their intertwined hands. "And now, what do you need now, Fiona?" "You," she said simply. "Just you, Isaac." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this for months, waiting for the right moment." Opening it revealed a delicate gold ring with a small pearl. "It was my mother's. I'd be honored if you would wear it." "Are you asking me to marry you, Isaac Xavier?" Fiona teased, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I am indeed Fiona Patterson," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you build a life with me, have that family you've dreamed of, grow old together in this wild, beautiful place?" Fiona took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger where it fit as if made for her. "Yes," she whispered. "To all of it, yes." They were married in the town church on a perfect autumn day, the mountains blazing with color around Clearwater Springs. The entire town attended, many wearing clothes made from fabric Fiona's quilting business had provided. Sheriff Miller gave her away, and Mrs. Henley, now her business partner, stood as her matron of honor. Their home expanded now to a proper ranch house, as the quilting business thrived, became known throughout the territory for its hospitality. Travelers often spoke of the warm welcome they received from the Xaviers. and particularly of the beautiful quilts that adorned every bed. 2 years after their wedding, Fiona gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Elizabeth, honoring both the husband she had lost and the sister Isaac had mourned. As she rocked them to sleep beneath a special quilt she had made just for them, incorporating scraps from her wedding dress, Isaac's favorite shirt, and yes, that last quilt she had nearly traded away, Fiona marveled at how life could change so completely. Isaac found her there, watching their children sleep. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy?" he asked softly. Fiona leaned back against his solid warmth, remembering that cold day when she had stood in Dawson's store with nothing but a quilt and her pride. "More than I ever imagined possible," she answered truthfully. "I knew from the moment I saw you," Isaac confessed. "Standing there so brave and proud, I knew you were the one I'd been searching for without even realizing it." As they stood together watching their children sleep, the past and future woven together as intricately as the patterns in Fiona's quilts, she thought of how a single moment, a desperate attempt to trade her last possession for food, had led to this abundance of love and life. The frontier that had nearly broken her had instead given her a second chance at happiness, and a love as vast and enduring as the Wyoming sky. "Keep warm with me," Isaac had said that snowy day. And through all the seasons of their lives together, through prosperity and hardship, joy and sorrow, that was exactly what they did, keeping each other warm with a love that had begun with a quilt and grown into a legacy that would warm generations to come.